Welcome to episode 110 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on August 15th, 2023. Surprise! I'm back with one more episode. This is not a weird marketing stunt. If it was, it would have been perhaps, in all actuality, the lamest one ever. No, I had the chance to do one more interview with a maker from issue 3 of the Journal of Scottish Yarns, so I took it. Today we're going to be chatting with Solvay Evans of Iolair Yarns and designer of the Sea Pinks top. Let's get to it. Solveigh sat down with me a couple of weeks ago at this point, and I've just today gotten my act together to edit the audio and prepare this episode for release. This really will be the last episode for a bit, as I will be on tour starting the morning after this goes live. And between this moment and that one, I will be preparing one child to go off to college and preparing myself to head back to Shetland for a full 2 months. There is a lot going on in the Frost household at the moment, so the timing of this hiatus is about as perfect as can be. Also returning in November will be another issue of the Journal of Scottish Yarns. Susan Anderson mentioned that she is hoping for the next issue to release on November 11, so I expect sometime in September we will get the opportunity to start pre-ordering. If you'd like to hear more about the upcoming issue, Susan gave some teasery hints, including a look at a few of the finished objects, in the last 2 Instagram live events that we had as part of the issue 3 make-along. You can go to my Instagram feed at I Thought I Knew How and watch those if you missed them when they happened. Scroll back to August 9th and 10th of 2023 and you'll see them there. All of that said, let's move on to today's interview. Solveigh Evans is a hand dyer and designer. Originally from Germany, her studies of geoscience brought her to Scotland over 25 years ago. She dyes lovely luxury fiber yarns, drawing inspiration from both the landscape around her and her personal color preferences. Please enjoy my chat with Solveigh Evans, and I'll be back on the other side. Solveigh, thank you so much for coming on the podcast with me. It's a pleasure to get to meet you. You mentioned on your website that you don't remember when you learned to knit, which just fascinates me when people say that, because I was older when I learned how to knit. But I'm curious anyway what your earliest memories of knitting are.
I started actually with crochet. I think I started very early. My mum must have taught me. We were also taught crochet and knitting in primary school, and I must have crocheted before because we had to do these little like oven gloves in cotton, and I crocheted that, and the teacher said she didn't believe me that I was crocheting this. She thought my mum had done it, and I remember I was absolutely terrified because I had to sit in front of her and crochet while she was watching me. I remember that. But I must have knitted very quickly after that. I knit the continental way, continental style, and that is quite similar to the crochet hook. It's just that you use a knitting needle. And then I just always knitted. I think I started with little cowls, so my mum must have cast on and then put it in a round, and then I just knitted the cowl. And then she showed me how to do raglan, which is, the really, really simple style, starting from the top, 4 increases. So I knitted jumpers. When I was quite young, when I was a teenager, earlier, we went to an island called Amrum, which is on the west coast of Germany, in the North Sea, and it's absolutely stunning there. And we went, for long walks on the beach. It's a really, really big beach, sort of 10 kilometers long, 3 kilometers wide. And I remember we walked and then coming back to the house, and then I just knitted, and I knitted the jumpers there. It's just like that. I just tried it on, knitted, and I still remember most of them, actually. I still remember the yarn, the colors, what I did there. Yellow and grey were always my favorites. I did definitely do that. I also remember we had lived in this small town at the Baltic Sea, and they had a really nice little yarn shop. I saved my pocket money, and I always bought the best yarn I could afford. and just knitted jumpers. And then we knitted as teenagers, I think, with my friends as well. So then I went to the higher school, and it was a bit further away from my town. So I stayed in the library, waiting for the bus. I had sometimes some free time, and I waited in the library. And then there were knitting magazines or books. So that was the first time I actually saw patterns. I think I started a jumper, which was sort of with the cable, but where you had to sew everything together. I think I never finished it because I just don't like sewing. It hasn't changed. I always knit without sewing anything. I just don't like it. I must have knitted during university times, but I don't remember it that well. But I found recently a diary and sort of skipped through it, and I was standing something, I have to finish this jumper, but I can't remember that jumper. Yeah, and then I started again when I was pregnant with my son. So with my late husband, Richard, he lived on the Isle of Mull, and it was really stormy outside, and we were inside, and we were having the fire on, and I really had the urge to knit, and couldn't find any yarn, couldn't find anything. And I remember I went to Glasgow, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. It wasn't important. I just wanted to knit. It was just more the process of knitting than knitting something at that point. Then my son. So I was pregnant with my son, and then I started to knit a lot for him. Then I discovered Elisabeth Zimmermann, and suddenly converted. So then I started knitting after patterns, but then always converted it to knitting in the round, so with satin sleeves or something, not knitting in, everything in pieces and having to sew it together. And now I'm knitting, I think, every day. I mean, now I'm knitting for work.
I love that the way you started, so many people are started, at least here in the States, they're started on a scarf, just long back and forth, and people end up getting bored of it, or it starts to feel tedious. I love the fact that you were started on a cowl where you're just in the round over and over, and then onto sweaters, because as you say, it's just 4 places to increase. And then you're onto something that's more practical and wearable, more exciting to have done. I love that. We get so scared of that, at least here in the US.
I mean, nowadays, if you think about raglan, there's much more complicated than just 4 increases. But at that time, that's fitted perfectly. It was fine.
Yeah, we've gotten smarter about some, extra shaping for the neck, I think. Yeah. So you mentioned that you grew up in Germany. What brought you to Scotland?
So I'm a geologist by training, and in Germany you do sort of a master's degree. Part of the degree is that you do a sort of lab or analysis thesis, and you do a mapping thesis. And we went to the Isle of Mull on the west coast of Scotland. And this is where I met my late husband, Richard. And we went back to Germany. I finished my degree. We went back and forth between Scotland and Germany for 2 years. And then I decided to come to Scotland. And I worked for 1 year in East Kilbride in Glasgow in a geochemistry lab. And then I started my PhD in Edinburgh on volcanic rocks. Richard was still on Mull, so I still traveled back and forward on the weekends. So the first time I came in 1996, and then I moved to Scotland in 1998. And in 2002, Richard then got a job in Edinburgh. So then he came to Edinburgh.
Was he a geologist as well?
No, he was an ornithologist, so he was looking after the eagles on Mull. This is where Iolair yarn comes from.
I saw on your website that Iolair, that's the Gaelic word for eagles, is that correct?
So this is the Gaelic word for eagle. He took the picture, which is on my logo, and I had a friend helping me to trace that. So this is actually a real eagle traced. And then I was thinking about the name, and Iolair means Gaelic in Scottish Gaelic as eagle. So he was working for RSPB, for the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, looking after the sea eagles on Mull. At that time, there were only 2 pairs, and they were quite sort of just reintroduced and quite rare and special. Now there are much more pairs and they're more populated. By that time, it was quite something. So he also then later published a paper where he traced on old maps, looking at all the Gaelic names on it, and Iolair was one of them, where he could then trace where the eagles have been in the past. And that's why I then have chosen one of his words he used on the maps, and that is it's the Iolair one. He used a couple of others, but yeah. So this is where it comes from, my name.
You're here as a designer and a yarn dyer. And it sounds like you just started designing as soon as you were knitting, but how did you get into dyeing yarn?
So this is a bit of my sad story, really, because 7 years ago, Richard had a cardiac arrest on his bike to work and died. And at that time, I was working as a geoscientist, and I just knew I had to stop and take time to grieve. And my son was just 12, and I had to look after him. He just started high school a week later. And so I thought, okay, I have to stop and rethink my life. And actually, at that point, didn't even know how my life will go on. A couple of months later, my old boss took me to the beach and said there is this place where there is a cafe and we can have a coffee afterwards. So we went to Cockenzie House and Gardens and we had a coffee, and I thought, this is an interesting place. It looks like there are quite a lot of studios here. And it was just out of a blink of a moment, I just asked if they have a studio and I could just dye yarn. So they found one of the trustees and she said yes. Actually, she also is a knitter and has her own 2 sheep. She has 2 Shetland sheep, I think. So she just totally loved the idea. So then she said yes. And they wrote me an email even saying, please come. I actually expected, this is a waiting list, put your email down there. And it just felt like it was meant to be in a way. It's really strange to say, but yeah, so I just took that studio and thought, right, I just dye yarn. And it was just for me, for myself. I loved the idea. I can just come, I have something to do. I can come if I feel like it, and I can't, I don't have to go when I don't feel like it. And it's directly at the sea. It's absolutely wonderful. It's a lovely place. It has a cafe, there's allotments, there's a little garden. I just totally love it there. So I started dyeing yarn. And then my friend Mika, who at that time organized with Joe the Edinburgh Yarn Festival. I've been working at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival as a staff member at the entrance. She said, Solveig, we give you a stall on that Sunday to sell your yarn. I was absolutely unbelievable, these 2 ladies. Then I suddenly had to do it.
Wow.
Yeah, so then I suddenly was busy dyeing the yarn, and then I always designed, for myself and stuff, but then I thought, okay, I have to have some designs which show my yarn. So I designed very quickly a shawl and a beanie, I think, which I could show. That's a Scythian shawl and the Isa beanie is still there. Yeah, that was it.
That's incredible. So you start in a studio, dyeing for yourself, and then your first show is the Edinburgh Yarn Festival.
So on the Sunday, it was she had a special, it was a sort of limited number of tickets, and it was called Wool, I think, and it was for wool producers or for smaller businesses. And I think it was 5 hours, and it was absolutely incredible. Yeah, 2 friends with me who helped me, and it was just wonderful. Yeah, very scary, but also really nice.
So how was the reception then from the people coming by your stall?
Yeah, so we were selling. It
Yeah.
was incredible. It was really incredible. I mean, I remember I was standing there and saying to my two friends, "You just have to do it. I can't deal with it." And these two were wonderful. And yeah, so yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, the Edinburgh Yarn Festival was fantastic anyway, in any sense.
I never got to go, but my impression is that the people who did go went with the intent to buy.
Yeah, and people were coming in because we were at a till. People
Mm-hmm.
were coming in dancing. It was incredible, lovely. It was just such a lovely thing. Yeah.
What a way to start. My goodness.
I think I've been lucky in a sense that I always sort of the lovely people around, or maybe just been lucky to meet them. I think that's really it.
I feel like this is just a lovely community to be a part of in general. I'm not saying there aren't grumpy people. You meet the occasional grumpy person, but they tend to either get turned around or sort of wash out of the community on their own.
I think as well in general, it's just lovely, lovely, lovely people around.
Yeah, just I mean it's wool and knitting and comfort, cozy things. How can you be grumpy and and mean? This is what we're doing, you know?
It's so nice. I mean, it's in a way, it's so. Yeah, exactly. So for me as well, when I started, it was just the feel of the yarn, the colors. It just makes you happy. It was actually one of the first moments after Richard's death was when I was sitting in that cafe and they had the stove on. I'm still approaching, actually, I have to say, I was still approaching my dying as a scientist. So I had all these little samples with, where testing the colors and stuff. And I was sitting there and think it was just one of these moments. You have sometimes these moments in life, and it was a moment where I just thought, I will be okay. Yeah, so that there's something about the feel of the yarn and doing something with it, which is incredible, soothing and helping and mending. And
That is a very brave thing to do too, to step away from your full-time employment and into a creative field. Was that something that you did as soon as you got the studio? Did you give up the geoscience or
yeah,
did you?
so the geoscience, so that is all complicated as well because I was working at the British Geological Survey as a postdoc, and then my contract finished. I was then 1 year sort of trying to find a job, and then I was actually doing another MSc in water and environmental management, which is sort of changing from volcanic rocks to actually sediments and soft rocks and the environmental contamination side. So I was doing this for 1 year, and then it all happened. So then I thought I can't go on with this. There's no way. I need a break.
New beginning.
And a break, and it just need time. Mika once took me and two friends of mine. I don't know if you know, but she actually also dyed yarn, and she just took us to her dye studio, and we did some dyeing experiments, and I totally loved it. So that was also that of still in my mind, that why don't I try this now?
These pivot points are really hard in life. There's just these big moments that we have to face sometimes, and it's amazing what you've done coming through that. Your yarns are beautiful. I've been poking around on your website ahead of our discussion and just thinking, oh my gosh, this is a very dangerous website for me.
It's I think I just do the colors I like, actually. So you might have noticed there's some colors missing.
Well, we have similar interests, I think. I think we have similar color preferences because everything that's there, I'm just like, oh, this is so beautiful. One of the things, as I was poking around on your website, one of the things that I appreciated was you're very clear that you have a no superwash policy when it comes to your bases. I'd like to give you a moment to talk about why you made that decision to have no superwash yarns.
I think, first of all, a personal choice. I think there is a place for superwashed yarn. It's good for kids. You can put it in the washing machine. You don't have to worry about it, that it felts, all these things. It's very easy to dye. It takes up the dye very quickly. You can make these beautiful varied yarns. You can make, sprinkles and all that. Definitely a place. But the process of achieving it, I sort of made a decision, but it's also the feel. I don't quite like the feel as much as I like the nutshell yarn. So the process is that it is chemically processed. So all the little scales of the wool sort of chemically raised off, and then it is coated with a plastic polyamide film, which of course then that's why it doesn't fade, and you can put it in the washing machine. But at the same time, it loses the quality of the wool, which is that the fiber sticks together. And for me, I just like the feel of natural yarn. I just like the feel of it, and I like to wear it more than the superwashed yarn bases. So it's just more of a personal choice for me. And it has some, I have to be much more careful, obviously, with the dyeing. So if people use trays for the superwashed yarn, they can just pick up the skin and turn it around. I would never do this with my yarn when I dye it. So there are limits, and also then what colors you can achieve as well. So, but yeah, I'm happy with that choice. I've got this niche, and I'm limiting myself maybe sometimes. I don't have sock yarn, with nylon in it. But then there are other wonderful dyers who do that. So everybody has a little niche, and I think that is fine and brilliant.
I wouldn't say it's impossible to find on this side of the Atlantic, but it's very rare on this side of the Atlantic to find a hand dyer who does not use superwash. And a lot of the hand dyers, it's all superwash. They only work with superwash. So I'm just thrilled anytime I find a hand dyer who is not working in superwash, just to have the option, to have the choice, because as you said, it is a different feeling. It behaves differently. And it's so nice to still be able to enjoy the beautiful colors that the hand dyers come up with and still have it be on equally beautiful yarn. So I appreciate
it. It's a personal, and I think everything has its place, that all of them are there and they are for use, and it's important that they're all there.
Right. I want to say you have 5 different bases that you dye onto.
Yeah, and changing at the moment, actually. One of the one which is also the seeping top knitted in is the alpaca silk cashmere one, and that's one of my favorites at festivals. And I have it in a 4-ply and a DK, and I also want to have it in an Aran. And I've got some merino silk, but I might, and I'm slowly at yarn festivals, will have others, because I have a yak silk, which non-superwashed, which is my most expensive one, but absolutely amazing. If I continue that one, and that is also dyed with greener shades. I don't know if you've heard of them, and they're Organics Association certificated, very, very expensive dye. So I can't do this on everyone. And then I'm there in the US, so unfortunately as well. And then I'm having a new base, which is a UK base, which is Blueface Leicester alpaca. That has been custom spun for me. I've done some dyeing on them, but I will also get a Scottish yarn, which is at the moment at a mill in Scotland. That will be alpaca, and this is very, very, very new. And North Country shivered. That is really exciting. I don't know when they will have finished it, but I'm so looking forward to have this.
Yeah, something for us to watch out for. That sounds great.
Yeah. And then I've got some, I think there's a Burnery one, there's merino silk, but that is sort of running out of it as well. So, so I'm always trying to, maybe, find some others as well, see if it works.
I have you here, of course, because you're involved with issue 3 of the Journal of Scottish Yarns, and you designed the sea pink top and created the yarn for it, for the pattern. Before we talk about that, though, I'd like to hear about how you got involved with the publication. How did you make the connection with Susan?
I think it was at Bannock Yarn. That was a small festival near Stirling, and that was where Susan was. And I was a vendor. We were both vendors, and I think we all just started talking. And then she saw some of my patterns, I think. I can't remember quite how it worked. And then she said, "Well, why would you like to have a pattern in one of the issues?" So I first thought it was a shawl, actually, but then she saw some of I had sort of some the lifeline cowls, and I think she said, "Could you maybe do a color work top, summer top?" And I just went, yes. So yeah, that was a very steep learning curve for me, and I was very glad I was in winter. So I did a lot of research. I had a lot of books on designing and all these sorts of things, trying to find sizing. How do you make sure it fits? And had lovely Samira as an editor as well. Then it slowly came, and I can't remember actually how it started with. I think I first wanted to do maca flowers, and then I tried to put my yarn together and wasn't quite happy. And then suddenly I thought, I think we were out in the Outer Hebrides again, and I just love the sea pinks. And I thought, why don't I do a sea pink one? And then actually doing it in the colors of the sea and in the pink. So it's also sort of a word thing. And it suddenly everything fell into place. So when I was a kid, I don't know, in Germany, so here you use often sort of lined paper, but in Germany you use a lot of the square papers in school, little squares. So I always made patterns on them. This is actually like fair isle patterns you do nowadays. I just remembered that I was always doing that. Loved doing that. So I just put the flower. I had definitely the big flower I had first, and then just putting the little flowers on above and below.
Well, it's been a hit. I know quite a few people have been knitting it for the make along, but then also as people are posting their pictures of their progress, other people are falling in love with it. And I would say it's mainly because of the hem that you have for the garment, which I don't think people notice in the photography for the journal. But then when people are posting their progress pictures and they see a close-up of it, everyone's like, that's incredible, that's amazing, and more people are wanting to knit it because of that. Could you take a few minutes and maybe walk us through some of the design elements other than the color work, which is beautiful in and of itself? But walk us through your pattern.
I did it also for the cowls. I just like the 2-color cast on, because you've got this little nice rim, and then I really like to do a braid. So this is how it starts. And then the rest is actually I invented. So I wanted to do a herringbone one, but I didn't want to do a sort of herringbone one, but normally they're quite tight. And I have one pattern which uses yarn overs, but you can't use that in the round because you go back and forth, so that they go crossing each other wasn't possible. So I'm swatching. I'm always swatching, by the way. But actually, I find it amazing when people do these wonderful square swatches and they hang them, have these mood boards and stuff. Absolutely amazing. Would love that. My swatches they go on and on and on and on, and they become long scarves, because I often, while I knit, I sort of, why don't I try this? Why don't I try that? So this is what I've done with the edge. And I found a way that they cross each other, and it looks a bit like a herringbone, but you can also knit it in the round, and It is a bit complicated at the seam, but actually it also works. So you actually don't see where one round begins and the next one ends. So it took me a while, but I got there. Yeah, I think nearly never knit as a normal standard rib. It's just, again, personal choice. I don't really like it. I think there are much more interesting ways of doing an edge. So this is sort of why I did this. Yeah, and it seemed to be something that people really like it, so which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely gorgeous. I've mentioned many times before that if I have 3 projects I picked out, and if I finish them, I'm getting the yarn to make this top because I just think it's absolutely adorable. The flowers at the top, I think the flowers are what catches everyone's eye, and that it's a short sleeve sweater. So they think, oh, lighter and it's sweet and charming. And then, and then they see the hem, and you have it around the neckline as well, the herringbone and the braid. And it just gives such a beautiful finish to the garment. And really, I think elevates it beyond, I knit this sweater. It's more crafted, I think. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Yes.
Beautiful.
It was really fun to do. I really enjoyed it. And I normally always did, shawls and beanies and gloves and all that, accessorize. But yeah, I think I might do more.
You mentioned that you did the research and the different books about the design as you were doing this. And one thing I'll throw out there too is it's a very size inclusive pattern as well. It goes up to a 60-inch bust. So for those of you who are looking for larger size patterns, the Sea Pink top, it's there for you in issue 3. Go pick it up. We can knit it along after the make along's over. Hopefully. I'm getting very close. To being finished with my project. So things are looking good.
Yeah, I wanted to, for the knit along, wanted to knit Samira's shawl. But I also need a sea pink top for the shows for me to wear, because I've got one sample, which is the first one. I don't really, that's just, my first sort of doesn't work, and the arms are a bit too long for me anyway. And the other sample I gave to Susan. So I need one, but I will knit Samira's shawl at one point.
Yeah.
But it's just that I have always other designs in my head I need to knit, and there is just not enough time.
We all need octopus arms just so we can keep a couple sets knitting at all times as we go through. This has been a dangerous make along for me because I picked my 3 projects, and I was gonna, as I said, have the Sea Pinks as my reward if I finish. And then I've added the Roebuck shawl to those 3, and Samira's brioche shawl. She's talked me into trying that one. And the thrown-in top, I keep seeing. At first I was like, oh, that's nice, and then I'm seeing people finish those, and I'm like, oh, now I want one of those.
Yeah, it has been, I think, and maybe the knit along definitely helped, or the make along definitely helped as well. I think for people to be more aware of issue 3, suddenly everybody, so many people knitting, or the projects, there's so many lovely projects in there as well. I mean, all the others as well. Yeah, I think the make along definitely helped, I think.
Well, I hope so. I hope there was a boost in sales for issue 3 and people go out and buy issue 4 and keep this momentum going, because I think Susan's doing marvelous work with the publication.
Marvelous work,
Yeah.
Totally agree.
I wanted to ask you, before we move on from the Sea Pink top, a lot of people are used to doing color work using 100% wool. And the yarn that you have recommended for it is your alpaca cashmere silk combination, which to me sounds like it's going to be maybe a little slicker, maybe.
So I've wrote, I think, in the pattern as well, that because it is alpaca, it is important to make a swatch to see, because it is a bit more stretchy. So just to make sure. And so it feels a bit different, but it's also really, really nice and soft. The color work itself might not stick quite as much together than wool does. But so I wasn't first sure actually. Would it work? This is just my favorite yarn, and
Uh-huh.
again, it's just my personal choice. Nearly all of my shawls are in this yarn. I was thinking, okay, I maybe just try it and see if it works, and then it worked. And I think because the edge doesn't curl, it's quite sort of a bit more solid in a way with this crossing of the stitches. Maybe that's why it worked. But I think it would be also, and people now knitting it with wool as well, I think it would be really nice with that as well. Really interesting to see how it
Yeah.
looks in other yarn. So again, it was just maybe because I like that yarn.
Yeah. That's okay too. Yeah, try it. A lot of like we have been encouraging people to stash dive as part of this make along,
Yes,
but
definitely as well. Yes.
yeah, but that is actually what I've done for all of my projects so far. But this is my reward. I can't win any of the prizes because I'm hosting the make along, so I had to have a reward there waiting for myself.
Yeah, yeah.
Solveig, what do you have coming up in the near future that people should be watching for?
I'm attending 4 yarn festivals this
Oh,
year.
wow.
So I've attended Tangled, which was in Shields. So now my next one, there are 2 in September, which is the Scottish Yarn Festival and Yarndale in Skipton. That's my first English show I ever go to. And then I go to the Glasgow School of Yarn, and then I'm going to the knitting and stitching show in Harrogate, which is also the first time for me. That's also in England. I'm at the moment dyeing yarn.
I bet that's quite an assortment of
Yeah.
festivals that you have coming up. I'm sure you're very busy in the studio at the moment.
Yeah, nearly every day, even on the weekends, because I also have some shops which are coming back with orders. So yeah.
I love to hear the success. That's fantastic. Wonderful. So if people can't make it to one of the festivals though, how do they find you online?
So they'll find me on my website, www.iolairyarn.com. They'll find me on Instagram, Iolair Yarn. Yeah, if people are in the area, I don't store my yarn in my studio. I just dye it there. It's a really small place. People can always email me and come along. I can bring yarn in. I've done this with people. And sometimes on Christmas or other places, I sometimes have an open studio as well. And then there's some yarn shops as well who have my yarn.
Wonderful. And I think you have those shops listed on your website.
At the moment, mainly it's a Woolly Brew in Pittenween in Fife and Stitchcraft in Calendar.
Solveig, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you very much too. It was a pleasure.
I came out of my chat with Solveig feeling like I'd had a gentle conversation with a friend. Thank you again, Solveig, for braving the interview process to spend some time with me. If you'd like to see Solveig's work, again, the Sea Pink top pattern is available in issue 3 of the Journal of Scottish Yarns, and her yarn is available at iolairyarn.com. Both of those will be linked in the show notes. I am very happy to report that I did finish my 3 goal projects for the make-along, and I've already ordered the yarn to knit my own sea pink top. I decided on a brown for the background color. Shocker, I know. Everyone who has been on the Mackinac Way through Shetland tours and has seen what jumpers I buy from the local makers are laughing their heads off right now. Anyway, yes, it will be a brown base, and then I got yellow orange and bright yellow orange for the flowers in the yoke. So while I'll be knitting the sea pink top, I think it's going to end up more of an homage to buttercups, which were a favorite flower when I was little, and I'm a bit tickled by the idea of wearing a ring of them around my shoulders. I know several of you started the sea pink top for the make-along. I don't remember now if anyone finished it before the make-along was over. If you are still working on any of your make-along projects, go ahead and keep using the yarn MAL 2023 hashtag when you post about them so others can see them. And I would love it if you would tag me directly too, because sometimes Instagram won't show me a hashtagged post for a few days unless I go looking for them. We had to end the make-along sometime, but I'd still like to see everyone's finished projects, no matter when they get done. A few more things before I go. The Shetland Hogmanay boxes are down to the last 4 boxes as I'm recording this, and box 2, the winter-inspired colors, is totally sold out. There are just 4 spring-inspired boxes remaining. All the details about the boxes can be found at store.ithoughtIknewhow.com. They are an Advent-style yarn box that is oriented around New Year's Eve rather than Christmas. Hogmanay is how the Scots refer to New Year's Eve. This means that these boxes have 30 days of yarn rather than your standard 24 or 25 from most December mystery boxes. The yarn included is from 5 Shetland yarn producers who each have 6 25-gram balls of their yarn included in the box for a total of 30 days of yarn. Day 31 will be a gift packet with a pattern designed by Terry Laura, a Shetlander who grew up in the workshop of her grandmother, Wilma Malcolmson, and is herself a skilled designer, teacher, and wool advocate. Also in the packet will be a selection of gift items from Shetland makers. The price of the box includes the shipping fee to anywhere in the world. The boxes will ship from Shetland in mid-October to have plenty of time to get to you by December 1st. You can open your daily yarn packet along with me, as Jana from the Purl Together YouTube channel and myself will be doing our daily vlog event through December again. Again, there's only 4 of these left. You can get all the details and place your order using the link in the show notes or by visiting store.ithoughtIknewhow.com. The dinner I'm hosting at number 88 in Lerwick during Shetland Wool Week now has 4 spots open as someone has unfortunately had to cancel their trip. We don't have to fill this space, but you would be more than welcome to join us. Non-knitting companions are welcome as well. In fact, there's already a handful of non-knitters signed up, so don't feel shy about bringing a partner along. This is a listener dinner just in that I'm spreading the word among my listeners, but the emphasis is really on the dinner. This isn't like a fan event or anything. People don't need to know who I am. It's not an ego-driven activity. I basically want an excuse to see a bunch of friends and not have to eat alone one night. But I do need to know who's coming so I can let the restaurant know our numbers ahead of time because we are limited in the number of people who can come because it is a room just for us. So this is the only reason why there's even a sign up. That event will be happening the Wednesday of Shetland Wool Week at 6 p.m. at number 88, which is just on Commercial Street there in Lerwick. Everyone's responsible for their own bill at the end of the night. Again, we're just getting together to have a meal with some like-minded people. Get all the details for that using the link in the show notes or visit the I Thought I Knew How group on Facebook and look in the events area. Okay, my lovelies, I will be around on social media for the next few months, but I don't expect to have another episode out until November. I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer if you're in the Northern Hemisphere and the end of winter if you are in the Southern. I'll be back with more tales of Shetland and knitting and possibly a return to the master hand knitter stuff. Maybe? I guess we'll all see. In the meantime, thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. The show notes are where you will find links to the things mentioned in the show, so be sure to check those out. Find me on my social media accounts as I Thought I Knew How, except on Twitter where it's just Thought I Knew How. I guess we're calling it X now? Anyway, you know where I mean. The groups on various platforms are all called I Thought I Knew How podcast. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time to knit.